Welcome to the Scaleup Valley Podcast, where we bring the best tech leaders in the world to help you scale your SaaS business from 2 million ARR to 100 million ARR. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Sanjoe Tom Joes, the CEO at Talview. Sanjoe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. It's my pleasure to be here.
And yeah, let's get to know a little bit more about yourself. So how did you end up starting up Talview?
Yeah, so Talview is actually my third startup, and
Cool.
and this is the second one in the HR tech space. So just before Talview, I had co-founded a company called Interview Master. This was a pure play video interviewing platform focused on mid-market companies. So this company was based in India, and we were selling to mid-market customers across the globe from Bangalore. And
Cool.
just before that, I had co-founded a company called Merry Wheels. Merry Wheels was a pre-owned automobile car portal, and that was also my first startup. And prior to that, I was a territory manager with National Instruments. National Instruments is a
Got it.
Texas-based instrumentation company, and I was a sales guy, so I did sales. And long before that, I started my career with Larsen and Toubro, which is one of the largest engineering companies in the Asia Pacific region. And
Got it.
I started my career as an executive assistant to one of their business unit heads. Did a lot of travel in that role, and that gave me a lot of exposure, and that has tremendously helped me my career so far. And yeah, I think like most people who uh, who are who are born and raised in India and then moved to the US. I also went to school in the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT
Got
Bombay.
it.
Yeah, so that's about me. I actually grew up in a very small town in the southern part of India. It's in a state called Kerala.
Got it.
Uh, it's a very small state on the southern tip, and yeah, growing up, I never thought I would do startups. But then I think by the time I was probably 15 or 16, I realized that I would want to build something on my own, and that's probably my path. So yeah, I think since then I've been working towards building my own business, and I'm very happy to be an entrepreneur right today and enjoying what I'm doing right now.
That's awesome. And explain a little bit more about what is Talview.
Yeah. So, like I said, just before Talview, we had another startup in the HR tech space, and that company we were selling to mid market customers in a space which was still very early. So we
Yep.
realized that we had good traction. So we had raised funding from two very well-known investors, and we also had a lot of initial traction. But what we
Mhm.
realized is because the space was very early, we won't be able to build a large company in that space. However, a lot of interesting insights from that experience. So what we wanted to do at that point was, so we wanted to pivot to a model where rather than selling to mid-market companies, we wanted to sell to enterprise organizations.
Got it.
And and if you are selling a new category to large enterprises, you have to be here in the US.
Got
Uh,
it.
Unfortunately, some of the team members and also the investors felt that that's a big risk making that change. But me and a couple of my co-founders, we are very sure that that's the way to go. So we actually work with a new investor here in the Bay Area to buy out the entire company, the existing company,
Wow.
and set up Talview. So that's how Talview came into being back in 2017, early 2017. And so from the inside, which on top of which Talview was built, is essentially the fact that speed of hiring, or what we call is hiring lag, is one of the biggest challenges for large enterprises in hiring, because
Got it.
if you have a long time to hire, it has a significant impact on your revenue, your profit.
Mm-hmm.
Positions are lying vacant. You're not. So if you are managing a sales organization or a service organization, you do not have enough people selling on the field or servicing your customers, and that impacts your revenue. Or if you are a professional services organization, every employee you have is billed to an end customer, and if you do not have enough people on your payroll, you end up not being able to bill your customer, and that impacts your revenue.
Got
And
it.
but not just that, but it also has today, speed of hiring has a significant impact on other key hiring metrics. So for example, if you look at quality of hire, the best candidates are today available in the market only for 10 days. So if you have a hiring process which is like uh, 2 months long, and that's roughly what the industry average is, your ability to hire the best candidates are significantly limited. The same way, if you look at candidate experience, another key hiring metric, 6 out of 10 candidates who drop off from the hiring funnel after you spend a lot of time and effort to get them interested in the role and apply to the company. They drop off because either the company took too long to make a decision, or the company is taking too long or too much time between steps in the hiring process. So essentially, we realized that if we could help our customers take control of their speed of hiring or time to hire, we can help them to take control of their entire hiring process. And we that's how Talview was founded. And we have an approach which we call Insta-hiring, which we believe is the fastest way to hire for enterprises. So we essentially are building a new category in the recruitment technology space.
Got it.
We hiring, and the approach essentially is a combination of what we call three propellants. So remote, automate, and reuse.
Hmm.
So if you look at the existing recruitment technology stack, applicant tracking systems or recruitment management systems are the core part of the recruitment technology in the industry today. But these systems came into being around 15, 20 years back, when equal employment opportunity and a lot of those regulations were uh, like driving the need for those systems. And you needed a system to do basic tracking and reporting so that you can demonstrate that you're compliant with these regulations. However, in the 20 years, these systems haven't evolved a lot. So they still remain as basic tracking and reporting system, while
Mm-hmm.
I still largely offline, and there is very little automation. So we built
Got it.
you as a layer of digitization which sits on top of existing applicant tracking systems,
Got
and
it.
use these three propellants to drive that digitization. So under remote, we virtualize the entire hiring process with the help of video interviewing, with the help of remote proctoring, so that there are no schedule or location constraints when it comes to the hiring process. And
Got it.
you enlarge your catchment area of talent pool significantly, because you can now hire from anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world.
Mhm.
And that significantly helps our customers to bring down time to hire. The
Got it.
second propellant is automate, where if you look at recruiting, there are a lot of steps which are today done manually by recruiters,
Mhm.
which involves a sequential processing and has a significant hiring lag or delay. So, for example, if a candidate submits an application on the career portal of a employer, it takes on an average around 2 weeks for the recruiter to look at the application and then decide if the candidate is a good fit or not. But today there is technology available which can do the same activity with significant amount of accuracy. So we essentially leverage bots to make a lot of this sequential transactions, which are today done by recruiters, completely automated in such a way that they not only happen in real time. So the moment the candidate submits an application, the system will match them against the best job description based on their profile. But we also make it see a parallel instead of sequential. So the boards can process hundreds of candidates in parallel compared to a recruiter who can do only one after the another. So, so that making this entire sequential delayed activities parallel and real time, we help our customers to bring down time to hire. And the third propellant is reuse, where essentially, again, if you look at any large enterprise, and we specifically focus on two customer segments. I'll speak more about that after this. But essentially, most of these employers they scrub the same target candidate pool multiple times a year. So you would see that the same candidate is getting processed 3 times or 4 times in the same year. And today, because there is no, every time a candidate comes back, there is no context of what has happened between the candidate and the employer in the last round. When the candidate comes back, they are asked to go through the same interview process, the same assessments. So it becomes very repetitive.
Crazy.
And
Yeah.
Talview, because everything happens online, and because we use automation, we collect a lot more data. Uh, so we are able to, when a candidate comes back, we provide the new hiring manager access to their past interview recordings, their assessment, past interview feedback. So the hiring manager can take a call on, hey, can this candidate directly move to a step 5 or a step 7 rather than starting from scratch? And that significantly shrinks the hiring life cycle. So between mod, automate, and reuse, we are able to bring down time to hire by up to 60% for our customers.
Amazing. And in terms of the growth stage for the audience, so the audience can relate to where you are and take your advice and your journey. So what is kind of the head count interval of revenues from 1 to 5, 5 to 10 million, and funding rounds and investors?
Yeah, so we've raised 2 rounds of funding right now. So the last round was Series A. So we did seed and Series A.
Got it.
Yeah. Team of 100 people right now, a little more than 100 between and India. And we today are in our journey from 5 million to 10 million right now.
From 5 to 10 million, that's the journey where you are in. So clearly now almost ready for Series B.
Yeah. Yes.
That's awesome.
Currently racing, but plan to do that later this year.
Got it. And we always talk on the show about the triple two times double free rule from Hagram from Battery Ventures in the show. I need to invite him to come to explain the rule himself. But that's a pattern that we see in the fastest growing companies of all times in SaaS. Companies like Salesforce, Zendesk, ServiceNow, that they are able to show that after 2 million ARR, they are able, and that's why the show covers 2 to 100 million, able to go from 2 to 6, 6 to 18, and then 18 to 36, 36 to 72, and 70 to 244. So this is a huge growth. So what is your perspective on growth for Talview? So this is the kind of aggressive path that you would like to embark on, or do you prefer a slightly slower pace of growth and more sustainable, less sustainable? I don't want to make any judgments, but what's your perspective on the growth pace?
I think what's called D2 or sorry D2 D3.
Right.
It's definitely no. I believe that's one of the ways in which you can build your company, and there's a pattern that's more a pattern than probably the only way to build a company. And every company is unique, every market is unique, and every founder and founding team is also unique. So at the end of the day, lot of how you should build a company is driven by what is your vision and what are you comfortable with as a founding team. But it also significantly depends on what market you are in and how the market is responding. So I think for us, and especially if you decide to take the path of raising VC money and then um,
going on this journey,
that you now will grow aggressively. So I think we are, while we are not trying to emulate like D2 D3 to the dot. I think that's definitely a good benchmark to see that, okay, are you scaling fast enough? But I would also put in a word of caution saying that if your market is not ready for that scaling, so just and that's a call which you have to make. If the market needs more time to adopt, it's still early stages and to adopt your particular technology. So just blindly pushing for T2 D3 might be a mistake. Rather, you should ideally, I would say, if you everything else is in place, you should first get to that 1 million or 2 million, uh, where your focus should be to try and figure out a lot of things in terms of what are your GTM metrics, what are your sales metrics, like what's your conversion rate, what's going to be your average contract value, uh, what is going to be the average quota for a ramped up rep. So if you're able to see some pattern in all of those metrics, and there is repeatability in the sales process, then probably I think so that means the market is responding well and you're probably ready for scale. So then you can actually uh, push for an aggressive growth. But if you're not seeing those kind of patterns emerging, I think you should spend more time to figure out those things, push for an aggressive growth. And if you look at all, I think I've read some of those papers where these patterns were first identified. But a lot the stage at which companies start on that journey differ from company to company. Some companies
Right.
take 3 years to start on that journey. Some companies take 1 year. Some companies take
Right.
5 years. I think that's probably the most crucial thing. How do you figure out that you are ready for that kind of scale?
For that. Absolutely. Yeah, and we always say that from 0 to 2, it's a wild guess because that's a search exercise of trying to find the business model. So it might be quick, it might be take a long time. And here it's about scaling in 5 years from the 2 to 100. But even there are different stages of growth and different things to prove. From 2 to 5 and 5 to 10, it's really the growth machine that can be scalable. And then 10 to 20, 50, it's really expanding. Verticals are expanding globally or even increasing ARPA. So I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. That's a very good point.
No,
And
yeah, at the end of the day, it's your personal call as a founder. Like, what do you
yeah,
want to do? Yeah. And given everything
absolutely.
supporting that journey. Yeah.
Absolutely. I like to say that strategy is really personal. So whatever the vision that you have for the company, that's fine. And there are different options to go for. And by the way, you don't need to go with VC. So there are other ways that sometimes are much more appropriate for your company. So we always discuss three critical ingredients to scale, which is radical focus, number one, number two, world-class leadership, and number three, a contrarian culture of execution. So starting by number one, of course, to go stage by stage and prove milestones, as you were saying, don't start scaling too fast if you have not proven the system, if you don't have repeatable and scalable and profitable processes or a sales or a growth machine to be more specific. So how do you ensure that from 1 to 5 and 5 to 10, you resist the temptation of starting to open too many verticals as you go from, as you said, you are now at 100 in terms of head count. Maybe after Series B, you would be expanding to 150 or 200 people. So it can be very tempting to go to too many geos, too many verticals at the same time. So how do you keep focus in your company?
No, I think focus is probably the most important thing when you're building a company in not just early stage, probably every stage. But I've
Right.
only seen early stage, so I can
Yeah.
talk about it. So for us, for example, at Talview, for the year 2020, we are focused only on three industries, and so we broadly, so from almost very beginning, and this is based on my learnings from the past startups, we had focused on only two segments of customers. So the first segment is
Mhm.
customers with a large field workforce. So this is your retail, hospitality, insurance, where if you do not have enough people on the field or at your stores at any given point of time, your ability to sell or service gets impacted, and hence time to hire is very critical. And the second customers in the professional services segment, which is your IT consulting, call centers, and your uh, tax and accounting. A lot of those industries where you bill so you have people on your payroll and you bill those people to your end customer. So for us, because time to hire is what we took as our true north. So beating hiring lag also for time to hire, we for us that was the true north. So we chose these two segment of customers almost from day one to go after. Now between these two segments also we had to make a choice, because you can't, this itself is too broad. So we decided, and because we while we set up the company here in the US, and we started hiring here in the US almost from day one. We still had a significant presence back in India, and a lot of relationships and customer relations from the previous companies. So because in India professional services was a much larger
Right.
space compared to retail and insurance, so we started focusing on that space. So a lot of our early stage traction came from some companies in the IT consulting space, and these were large enterprises. So we had almost from day one we had global contracts with those customers, but a lot of those relationships originated back in India. So we did that for the first 2 to 3 years, and then early this like Q2 last year, that is when we started expanding beyond that space, and we started selling to retail and insurance. So today we have customers like Amazon and Sephora, Walmart. So some of those big customers in retail space, and we're adding customers in insurance space like Alliance and Swiss Re and a lot of those customers. But we faced our journey, and because I had this experience from the previous company, so we tried to face our journey in such a way that we are not spreading our resources too thin. And that also becomes your competitive advantage, because one thing I've seen is most companies don't do a good job of focus, if, and especially
Right.
you're always resource constrained, and you're tempted to go behind five different things. But because you are resource constrained, and if you have the ability to focus and be patient, I think it's always better to pick your battles and be the best solution in a particular industry, in a particular geography, maybe in a particular customer segment like mid market or enterprise. Go as granular as possible early on, and try something for 3 months. If you're not seeing the early signs of success, then move on to the next segment, rather than probably trying five different things. And because something will always look promising, and entrepreneurs by default are very optimistic. So you will you will it's yeah, I think unless you force yourself to focus, almost everything will look like a great opportunity, and it can be a never ending back and forth.
Got it. And in terms of you talking about verticals, and that's really amazing. And definitely, you have been working on your previous startup. That then you have been evolving to this new one, to Talview. You move it from mid market to enterprise, or are you just exclusively focused on enterprise? There is also this discussion a lot when to go from mid market to enterprise, or if start with enterprise because sales cycles are long. Sometimes it takes more time, and in order to move to show metrics, it might be more challenging in the short term. In the long term, it might be amazing, but in between, it is a lot of stress in the process to see if things will really happen, or it is just but in terms of Geos, you have here an extra layer of complexity, at the same time a huge advantage. So you come from a market which is one of the two largest markets in the world, so very close to the second one, which is China, and you went to a market which is one fourth of yours in terms of population, 300 million, which is the US. Why, or do you keep clients in India, and why the US for you?
Yeah. So for us, because we focus on the enterprise market, US is the largest enterprise technology market out there. In fact,
Mhm.
almost 10 times as big as India, and definitely, I think, much bigger than China itself. So, and like I said, we have this very strong focus on this customer segments. And just to give you an example, so US alone has and we have a very strong focus also in terms of the customer size. So we focus on large enterprises, customers with at least 2,000 plus employees.
Got it.
UON has 4,500 such companies in the target industries which we focus on. And there, Europe together has probably close to 3,000, And APAC only has around 1,000 companies. So that's entire Asia Pacific together. Essentially, from that standpoint, US was much bigger. And we always knew that that's where we are going to build the company. Uh,
Interesting.
that we were resource constrained, and found as founders we were based in India and we need to relocate here to build the company and all of that. We started with an industry where we knew that okay, even if you're working with an IT consulting company back in India, they have significant presence here in North America, and that would give us differentiable customers and market exposure here in the US.
Got it. And you decided to move to the West Coast. So I assume this is also important in terms of focus. So you are not serving, or you are not trying to acquire customers across all the US, right? So
Yeah.
why the West Coast for your technology?
So that again was, I think we do have. I wouldn't say we are strictly selling to West Coast right now. We're very focused on US as a geography. Very focused on industries which we are selling. We are also focused on the customer size, but
Right.
not necessarily selling only to West Coast. But the reason we built the team in the West Coast is because that's where uh, I, as a founder, I am based out of, and it's always important that the early team you stay very close to them.
Got it.
You figure out a lot of the go-to-market nuances, which only you as a founder can do, because you need to understand how to build your product. You need to iterate your messaging, a lot of positioning, a lot of those aspects, which you cannot do unless you are very close to the market. And since I was based here, I decided to build the
Right.
team West Coast, but they are selling to rest of the US.
Right. How many people do you have close to you in the US of the 100 people that you have in the company?
I have 10 people right now here in the US.
Got it.
That's bulk of my sales and marketing function, while all of my engineering and operations and support is run from India.
Right. Makes a lot of sense, and it's a great advantage. And moving on to the second component, which is world-class leadership.
Yeah,
If all goes well, we will need to run and lead 7 companies. We'll need to have 7 different CEOs and 7 different leadership teams. So at this stage, you might have already been running 2 different companies inside yours, and even with the previous one that you have evolved, and now you are preparing the third one to get to 10 million ARR, and it will come the next stage
yeah.
again. So what were the most difficult positions for you to hire to be on this road now from 5 to 10?
I think every leadership hire, especially, is I wouldn't say difficult, but it's a not a difficult hiring process, but a difficult decision to make, because you cannot afford to go wrong early
Right.
stage. There are two aspects which, at least from my experience, I've seen are very critical. So one is, as a founder or founding team, you always have your own strength. So you could be very good in engineering, or you could be extremely product oriented, or you could be extremely go to market or sales and marketing oriented. So I think the first most critical hire is, so if you to find that area where you are the weakest in. And for us, I think luckily and probably because of our past experience, I, I was always running sales and marketing and I had past experience doing that and building sales teams. So, and my co-founder was he who is the CTO. He has been CTO in multiple companies before that. So we kind of had the luxury of not having to look outside, at least for the first few years. That I think if you build your co-founding team right, and first time, I think I made mistakes and most people make mistakes, that you have, if you, and I think sales, product, and engineering, those are probably the three most important pillars in an early stage company. And if you can afford to, then always start with a co-founding team, or a founding team which has those three pillars taken care of. And most founders are naturally product oriented, even if they are strong on sales or engineering. So I think that should in itself be taken care of. But if you can afford to start off, then start both sales and engineering with your co-founding team itself. But then beyond that, or if you're not a if you do not have a very strong sales person in your founding team, then I think sales hire becomes very difficult for interactions with a lot of other entrepreneurs, especially because most of the salespeople you find in the market, they are more people who can come into an ecosystem where everything is known. And then
Right.
so, but early stage, you need to do a lot of permutation, combination, and figure out a lot of those things.
Build a
So,
machine.
and there is no shortcut to, as a founder or as a group of founders, you have to do that. You can't expect somebody else to do that for you. I think that's critical. But I think then the most critical aspect is when to bring in your first sales leader, and that again I think is again a function of, so for example for us, I still do not have a chief revenue officer. I am playing that role.
Got
uh,
it.
I'm sure that so for me, by end of this year, that's a role which I want to fill. But then again, I'm looking at somebody who can take us from a 10 to 50 million or 10 to 100 million journey, and the number of variables are much lesser at that stage. But you still need somebody who can, so that also means that what entails that 10 to 100 million journey. So am I looking for somebody who, so if I need somebody who can just come in and double down on everything which is working. So if the industries which I'm focusing on, the geographies I'm focusing on, uh, that itself has potential to for me to grow from 10 to 100. So then there are plenty of talent available out there. But if in that 10 to 100 million journey I need to open a new industry or open a new geography, then that requires a different skill set. So I think a lot of permutation combination which you need to look at when you're making your sales hire. So that's the process which I'm going through right now.
Yeah, sounds amazing. And finally, the last ingredient, which is the contrarian culture of execution. So we all know that we might have the focus, the strategy, the direction. We might have the right team on the right seats, but then we need to learn as quick as faster and learn with reality. And this is all about having those rhythms: the weeklies, the dailies, the monthlies, the quarterlies, the annual reviews, the town halls, the one-on-ones. Is there any particular rhythm that you use to have everyone on the same page that is being very useful for you?
No, I think like very early on, because you mostly have your entire team in the same room or in the same floor, and you're constantly talking to people. It is easier, but as the team gets larger and you have people in different locations and remote teams and all of that, you need to put in a lot of structure and process around how we are communicating, how we are building the culture. But I think the most important thing, so one is the rhythm and the process around it. But for me, at least, I believe defining what is your culture is most important. If you have defined your culture in the right way, then the rest of the process can become significantly easier. So, and when I say defining culture, so I don't think there is one right culture. Every organization, every team is unique. But I think as a founder, what you need to figure out early on is what is the culture. So there are two aspects. So what's the culture which comes naturally to you? So you can't define an ideal culture and force fit yourself to that culture. So for example, if you define a culture where you say timeliness is very critical, and but you yourself are standing up 30 minutes late for every meeting, so that's not a culture which you can build even if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the first thing, most important, is to align yourself and your founding team with the. So you have a ideal culture which you want to have, and you have a culture which you're already exhibiting as a founding team. So you need to align and see, okay, what is the common area there, and if is that common area going to help me to build the right culture? Will that help me to take the company from where we are to where we want to be? And then, so I think that initial mapping process helps quite a lot in terms of defining the right culture. And once you define the right culture, I think then it's just about living and breathing it. So talk. I for example, make it a point that every conversation which I have with my team members, whether it's in the monthly all hands which we do, which is across the globe, or the weekly leadership meetings which I have, or the one-on-one reviews I have with my direct reportees, or the touch points which I have with the new joinees. Every conversation I talk about why we have defined our culture in a particular way, and why that is critical for the entire organization to go where we want to go. So I think talking about the culture and talking about the why the process of why did we choose this culture, and why how that is going to help uh, the company. I think that's something which you have to just keep repeating, and probably as a CEO, or as a founder CEO, that's your single biggest job after you have your uh, the rest of the functions taken care of. Yeah.
Absolutely. Amazing. And we come to the final question of the show, and one of our favorites, which is, if you would have the opportunity to come back to the beginning of Talview, what advice would you offer to Sanjoe?
So I think this is something that someone told me very recently, and uh, for me it made a lot of sense. So while I've been an entrepreneur before, I think one thing which I was not doing enough was appreciating the progress which I was making, or we were making as a company. I think I've been always been very hard on myself and very hard on the team. But because you are always so you always have a target, and that target keeps moving, right? So every milestone, you have new milestones. Uh,
Right.
but what I realized is it's equally important to take a pause and uh, enjoy the progress which you've made, and appreciate yourself and appreciate the team. And that I believe is very critical, and that is probably something which I've not done enough, because there is even in months or moments which were toughest for the company and for you, when you actually sit down and look back, you have made a lot of progress. It could be maybe your revenue did not move, but your product has significantly evolved, or maybe your team, you had some bad churn in the team, or things like that. But then you also added some great team members to it. So there is always a brighter side, and then you need to I think take a pause and appreciate those things continuously, because it's going to be a long journey, and there is no one final destination. I think the milestones will you will keep having moving milestones. And so if you cannot wait for the final destination to enjoy what you've built, you need to keep enjoying it through during your journey.
Amazing. Sanjoe, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your journey with us.
No, my pleasure. It was great being part of the podcast, and look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you very much. And to our community, thanks for being on that side. We keep bringing you the best of the best so you can leverage their mistakes or leverage their lessons and avoid their mistakes. We keep here for you. See you soon and keep scaling.